Have you ever felt like the world around you is getting dumber on purpose? Not in a condescending way, like you're smarter than everyone else, but in a deeper, more disturbing sense, like intelligence itself is being quietly exiled. Like thoughtfulness has become a burden. Like asking too many questions makes you dangerous. Imagine scrolling through your feed. You see a headline about war skip, a post about debt next, then a viral video, someone eating glue or screaming nonsense into a camera, and it has 10 million likes. 10 million? The comments. Iconic. This is peak content. I love how unserious they are. And suddenly you realize we're not just tolerating stupidity anymore. We're worshiping it. There was a time when art provoked, when conversation inspired, when people aspired to depth, complexity, nuance. Now, we crave what's easy, fast, loud. We don't want to understand, we want to consume. We don't want to reflect, we want to scroll. And here's the paradox. The dumber things get, the more popular they become. The more you flatten your voice, your opinions, your thinking, the louder the algorithm rewards you. In a world full of noise, silence is punished. In a world obsessed with performance, introspection is invisible. So the world dances, but no one's asking why the music never stops. Ask yourself, when was the last time you heard someone go viral for being wise? Not loud, not real, not outrageous wise. Where did the philosophers go? The truth tellers? The soul disruptors? They didn't disappear. They were silenced by distraction. They were buried beneath memes and marketing. They were replaced by influencers selling skin cream and nihilism. And maybe the scariest part is that we're in on the joke. We know the system is broken. We know the smartest voices are often the least heard. And yet, we scroll anyway. We smile at the absurdity, laugh at the idiocy, tap like, and move on. But deep down, doesn't it haunt you? This quiet suspicion that we're slowly suffocating under a culture that celebrates ignorance while mocking reflection? That thinking too deeply makes you pretentious? That depth is a liability, and being hollow is a form of social currency. How did we get here? Why does society reward the shallow and silence the thoughtful? What if stupidity isn't an accident, but a design? What if the glorification of the trivial isn't just cultural rot, but a symptom of something far more orchestrated? And most importantly, what happens to a civilization when intelligence becomes a threat? Hold that question, because to answer it, we have to dig into the roots, philosophical, psychological, historical, of why the modern world, under the guise of progress, might actually be punishing consciousness itself. To understand why stupidity is glorified today, you must first confront a darker truth. Shallow thinking isn't just tolerated, it's incentivized. This isn't simply about education failing or attention spans shrinking. The roots go far deeper, into psychology, into power, into the architecture of mass control. Start with this. A thinking mind is a dangerous mind. A person who questions, reflects, contemplates, they are harder to manipulate. They don't just absorb, they resist. They don't just consume, they evaluate. And in a system that thrives on conformity and consumption, that kind of mind is a threat. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." Stupidity, distraction, mindlessness, surface-level thinking isn't just a cultural byproduct. It's a defense mechanism, a collective avoidance of meaning, of pain, of truth. Because if we actually stopped to think, if we actually looked in the mirror, we might have to admit just how hollow we've had become. But the system doesn't want introspection, because introspection leads to dissatisfaction, and dissatisfaction leads to rebellion. So instead, the system drowns you in entertainment, dopamine loops, social validation, and digital noise. Aldous Huxley predicted this long ago, not with fire and force, but with pleasure and sedation. In Brave New World, the people weren't oppressed by fear. They were pacified by indulgence. They didn't need to be silenced. They chose to stop thinking, not because they were evil, but because thinking hurt, because silence was terrifying, because it's easier to laugh at nonsense than face the terror of the void. Now look around. The average adult consumes over 10 hours of media per day. We check our phones over 100 times in 24 hours. We binge, we scroll, we repeat. Each click, each swipe is not neutral. It trains your brain, it wires your desires. And slowly, your tolerance for depth evaporates. Why read a book when you can watch a reaction video? Why wrestle with moral questions when you can escape into the next trend? Why engage in uncomfortable thought when stupidity is painless? Here's where Nietzsche steps in. He warned us of herd morality, a psychological tendency to follow the crowd, to avoid the burden of independent thinking. He called it the death of the higher man, the rare soul who dares to rise above mass opinion. In a world that worships the average, excellence is mocked, and depth becomes a kind of sin. So stupidity becomes profitable. It becomes marketable. It becomes the aesthetic of the age, ironic, self-aware, charming in its idiocy. And we celebrate it not because we believe in it, but because it's safe. Here's the trick. The glorification of stupidity hides behind humor. It wraps itself in comedy, in memes, in satire. And in doing so, it protects itself from critique. If you question it, you're told you take things too seriously. If you challenge it, you're called pretentious. So the culture becomes bulletproof in its shallowness, because laughing at something is easier than fixing it. Philosopher Jean Baudrillard described this as the era of simulation, a time when images, signs, and entertainment replace reality. We don't experience the world anymore. We experience representations of it. We don't think, we react. We don't learn, we consume content. And slowly, we become detached from reality, detached from meaning, detached from ourselves. But here's the punchline. Stupidity isn't just entertainment. It's anesthesia. It numbs. It dulls the existential ache. And in a world where millions are depressed, disillusioned, and spiritually starved, being stupid becomes a form of survival. So ask yourself, when did thinking become dangerous? When did being deep become embarrassing? When did questioning reality get replaced by scrolling through noise? And more importantly, who benefits when you stop thinking? The answer isn't obvious. Because stupidity doesn't scream. It giggles. It entertains. It distracts you just long enough to forget that your mind is the last free territory you have. But what happens when you give even that away? Hold that thought, because next we're going to uncover what this glorification of the shallow is doing to you, to society, and to the very fabric of human identity. You might think stupidity is harmless, that it's just people having fun, not taking life so seriously. But what if the cost is far higher than you imagined? Because here is the terrifying truth. A culture that glorifies stupidity doesn't just stay stupid. It becomes blind. Not blind in the physical sense, but spiritually, morally, and intellectually blind. Unable to see what matters. Unable to feel what's real. It begins subtly. You skip the long article for a 30-second reel. You ignore the complex documentary in favor of a pranked compilation. You stop challenging your beliefs because challenge feels uncomfortable. And slowly, your mind forgets how to go deep. Your heart forgets how to care. And you begin to vanish. Because intelligence isn't just information. It's awareness. It's presence. It's the ability to pause, to reflect, to hold contradictions without breaking. And when a society loses that, it loses its ability to navigate reality. We become emotionally fragile because we never learned to sit with discomfort. We become ideologically rigid because nuance is too exhausting. We become manipulable because without depth, we rely on sound bites to form our beliefs. And then comes the final blow. We don't even realize it's happening. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman called this cognitive ease, the brain's tendency to prefer things that are familiar, simple, and emotionally gratifying. In other words, we like what doesn't make us think. It feels safe, but safety isn't the same as truth. The glorification of stupidity turns this bias into a way of life. We reward what's easy. We trust what's loud. We follow what entertains us, not what enlightens us. And so the culture begins to rot, not from outside attacks, but from within. Look at education. Depth is traded for standardized tests. Creativity is suffocated by performance metrics. Children learn that obedience gets you gold stars, not curiosity. And then we wonder why they grow into adults who fear complexity, who chase validation, who never question the script. Look at politics. Debates become memes. Policies are reduced to slogans. The loudest voice wins, not the most thoughtful. And the people, overwhelmed and underinformed, vote based on charisma, not character. Look at relationships. Conversations become content. Empathy becomes performance. We date for image. We speak in TikTok language. We crave attention, not connection. Because being known, truly known, requires emotional intelligence. And intelligence has become uncool. But perhaps the most dangerous consequence is existential. We lose meaning. We stop asking why we exist. We stop feeling awe. We stop seeking truth. Because stupidity doesn't just kill intelligence. It kills the impulse to even look for it. Aldous Huxley feared this above all. Not a world ruled by tyrants, but a world where people were too amused to notice their chains. Where thinking felt boring. Where books gathered dust. Where people laughed at truth until it disappeared. We are living in that world. And the consequences aren't theoretical. They're inside your body, your shortening attention span, your digital addiction, your unexplained anxiety, your inability to be alone in silence without reaching for a screen. These aren't coincidences. They are the symptoms of a mind that's been trained to avoid itself. And so we become easy to control. Because people who don't think deeply don't resist. They buy more. They question less. They mistake comfort for freedom. They call illusion reality. But the system is clever. It never tells you to be stupid. It just rewards you every time you are. More views, more likes, more attention. And you feel like you're winning until you wake up one day and realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. The truth is, stupidity isn't just a cultural trend. It's an anesthetic, a spiritual novocaine that numbs your soul just enough to keep you docile, to keep you scrolling, to keep you buying, to keep you asleep. But what happens when you finally stop? What happens when you rebel, when you think, when you reclaim the terrifying, beautiful burden of being fully alive? That's what we explore next. Because once you see the trap, the only question left is, how do you break free? Imagine waking up one day and realizing your mind no longer belongs to you. Your thoughts aren't yours. Your desires were sold to you. Your opinions are echoes of headlines, of trends, of someone else's profit-driven script. What would you do? Because once you see the glorification of stupidity for what it is, a silent war on depth, awareness and authenticity, you're faced with a choice. Conform or rebel. But here's the catch. Rebellion doesn't look like you think it does. It's not loud. It's not violent. It's not about shouting into the void or canceling the culture that raised you. Real rebellion starts in silence. It starts the moment you turn off the noise and listen to yourself again. The first act of rebellion is to reclaim your attention. Because attention is currency. It's power. Every time you give it away thoughtlessly, to outrage, to idiocy, to hollow trends. You weaken your capacity to think, to feel, to know. So stop, pause, look at what you consume. Ask, is this expanding me or numbing me? Then comes the second act, intentional thinking. Yes, thinking, not scrolling, not reacting, thinking, reading long-form essays, watching entire documentaries, sitting with opposing viewpoints without instantly rejecting them. This is radical now, because in a culture addicted to speed, slowness is subversive, depth is revolutionary. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But to find your why, you must first clear the fog. And that means choosing discomfort over sedation. Noticing when your instincts crave distraction and choosing presence instead. This is where the mind begins to sharpen, where the soul, long neglected, starts whispering again. Not through the chaos of the timeline, but in the sacred quiet of your own curiosity. And then the third act, reclaim your language. Because stupidity is also a linguistic virus. It infects the way we speak. We say, "I can't even," when we mean I'm overwhelmed. We say, "It's giving," or "I'm dead," or literally me, when what we're really expressing is emptiness. So start using language that reflects what you actually feel. Be precise. Be poetic. Speak as if words are spells, because they are. And when you speak with clarity, with depth, with courage, others remember they can too. Next, protect your boredom. Yes, boredom. Because boredom is the doorway to self-connection. If you always run from it into your phone, your feed, your next dopamine hit, you never reach the raw materials of creativity. You never meet the real you. And the real you? She's not shallow. She's not loud. She's not here for likes. She's quiet. She's fierce. She remembers. Now, none of this is easy. You will be mocked. You'll be told you're taking life too seriously. You'll lose followers. You'll feel alone. But look again. You'll also begin to see others who've quietly stepped out of the trance. Artists who still dare to be misunderstood. Writers who still value precision over virality. Philosophers who still burn with questions. Seekers who still sit in rooms without windows, staring at the wall and thinking, this is your tribe. The hidden rebellion, not glamorous, not popular, but real. To break free is to suffer. To think is to bleed. To awaken is to lose the comfort of illusion. But in that loss, you gain something extraordinary. Yourself. Because stupidity celebrated, viral, profitable is always borrowed. But wisdom? Wisdom is earned. It is the reward for those brave enough to walk through the silence, to wrestle with meaning, to choose reality over performance. And maybe that's the most radical act of all, to become fully conscious in a world that begs you to stay asleep. So start small. Read a book no one recommended. Have a conversation with no agenda. Create something no one asked for. Be bored. Be silent. Be curious. Because in the end, the real rebellion isn't external. It's not against them. It's against the part of you that gave in, the part that numbed out, the part that forgot who you are. And the more you remember, the more the system loses its grip. And one day, maybe without even realizing it, you'll look around and see that the shallow no longer tempts you. The noise no longer pulls you. The lie no longer fits. Because you've changed. And now, you're ready for the final truth. What if the greatest lie wasn't that stupidity is harmless, but that depth is dangerous? What if the world convinced you that thinking too much makes you broken, when in reality, it's your most sacred power? Here is the final truth. You were never meant to fit into a culture that profits from your distraction. You were never meant to feel at home in a system that rewards ignorance and punishes insight. The discomfort you feel, the alienation, the exhaustion when faced with shallow conversations, mindless content, hollow ambitions, That's not a flaw in you. It's a sign you're awake. The glorification of stupidity isn't just a social trend. It's a mirror, a brutal, unfiltered reflection of a society so afraid of truth that it drowns itself in noise. And the moment you stop dancing to that music, the moment you begin to see, everything changes. You start noticing what others miss. The manipulations hidden in comedy, the despair beneath the relatable memes, the loneliness behind curated smiles, and most of all, the hunger. A deep, unspoken hunger in everyone around you for something real. Because here's the paradox that no one tells you. Underneath the performance, everyone is starving for depth. We crave truth. We long for meaning. We ache for silence, but are terrified to enter it. And so the system thrives. Because as long as we pretend stupidity is freedom, we remain its slaves. But when you break free, truly break free, you don't just unplug. You awaken to something ancient, something eternal. A voice inside you that whispers, you were made for more. You were made to see beyond the surface, to ask terrifying questions, to sit in the presence of paradox, to love beauty that cannot be monetized, to protect your soul from noise dressed as novelty. And that realization, that's the moment of power. Not because you become better than others, but because you become sovereign. No longer manipulated, no longer sedated, no longer afraid to stand alone. You start building a different life. One where your worth isn't measured in clicks, but in clarity. One where your success isn't how viral you are, but how true you are. One where your identity isn't outsourced to algorithms, but rooted in presence, purpose, and principle. And when others look at you confused, maybe even threatened by your refusal to perform, they'll say, you've changed. And they'll be right. You have. Because once you awaken, you can't go back. The noise won't comfort you anymore. The distractions will feel empty. The shallow rewards will taste bitter. And in their place will rise something deeper. Something that doesn't need to be seen or liked or approved. Something timeless. Because the world will continue to glorify stupidity. But you will glorify truth. Not the kind sold in sound bites. Not the kind that flatters your ego. But the kind that undoes you, humbles you, reshapes you. The kind that demands silence, solitude, and soul. The kind that sets you free. This is your task now. To live intelligently in a world that prefers noise. To think deeply in a culture of shortcuts. To feel fully in an era of numbness. And it won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Because the final truth is this: stupidity is easy. Depth is sacred. And in choosing the sacred path, even when no one else sees it, you reclaim not just your mind, but your humanity. So walk quietly, think boldly, feel everything. And when the world laughs at your seriousness, your slowness, your refusal to join the performance, smile, because you know something they've forgotten. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more souls. And yours finally is awake.